Hello, readers! Welcome back to Reading in the Middle. I'm your host, Annisha Jeffries, and today we're going into the ocean, into a story about wonder and how a little cuttlefish named Rumi learns that the ocean isn't just water and waves, but a place where awe lives. My guest today is Garrett Ryan Oyama, author of Rumi and the Ocean of Awe. Garrett comes to this work not only as a writer for children and young readers, but also as a trained speech and language pathologist and a musician whose sense of rhythm, sound, and metaphor infuse the story. In Rumi and the Ocean of Awe, the ocean becomes a mirror of inner wonder. And we'll talk today about how Garrett uses his many creative hats to craft a story that speaks to curious kids and thoughtful adults alike. Garrett, welcome to Reading in the Middle. I'm so glad you're here. Garrett, hello. Welcome to Reading in the Middle. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me. This is an honor.
Oh, thank you. Well, happy to have you here. I want to start by asking you what first sparked the idea for Rumi and the Ocean of Awe. Can you remember the moment when the story's seed was planted?
You know what? Yes, absolutely. It kind of happened over a few months, or even years, maybe. I don't know. It's kind of been building in the back of my head for a long time. But just for a little context, I'm a speech therapist, and so I was working with kids for a long time, the past like 10 years or so. And as I was working in the schools, and I just sort of started noticing that a lot of kids that I was working with, there's they had issues with being on devices a lot, kind of addiction to social media. Definitely a lot of, and this is not just for them too. This is for me. This is for my friends. This is for like kind of all of us. But just a certain boredom and distraction and sort of a kind of a loss of meaning. And that kind of struck me. It happened over time, but I sort of noticed it more and more. And at the same time, in trying to figure that out with, what's going on with my kids, what's going on with myself, I started thinking about awe and wonder. And, there's these certain things that would open me up and make me feel myself again, make kids feel like themselves again in a way. And, I kind of found awe and wonder as this sort of antidote to that boredom and the distraction and sort of the kind of like purposelessness that I saw. And I ended up reading this book on the science of awe, by this Berkeley professor, Dr. Keltner. And he talks about these like 8 wonders of the world that are these things that, he goes through all of these kind of self-reports across the world, all this data, and he finds these like 8 things that stick out as things that really bring awe and wonder to humans. And I could go through them later, but basically each of the chapters in the book is related to one of these phenomena that bring wonder to people. Things like music and big ideas and spirituality, collective movement and nature, things like that. And I had this idea that, oh man, I would be so cool to make a kid's book about this because, I think a lot of times we, complain without doing anything. Um, and it started out as this idea of like, I'm going to make this kid's book. This kid's going to be addicted to his phone. And then, like over the course of however many pages, like 10, I don't know, I was thinking like a really, really young kid's picture book that, he would kind of overcome this by noticing and attending to kind of the mystery and the beauty around him, things that he had kind of gotten used to seeing, but then saw them again, in a new light. But I realized as I started writing it that that was not how it was turning out. It was like, I think for a lot of maybe just creatives or artists, and maybe this too, like when you start to make something, it's a bit of a negotiation. It's not just like you make the thing. It's a bit of you start to do it, and then the ideas also come to you and they shape each other. And there's this sort of like negotiation that happens. And then so as I started writing it, I realized, oh man, this is turning into like a long-term project. And so, yeah, that's kind of the start. Sorry for that long-winded response, but that's sort of the backstory. Future.
No, that's wonderful. So, writing for middle grade readers who are growing out of simpler picture books while still creating something that adults will enjoy, how did you balance that dual audience?
Yeah. Well, when I was young, I don't know why, but I was so drawn to these sort of mysterious stories that had a lot of things in them that, I didn't quite understand. It was like sort of at the edges of what I understood. Like I understood something about it, but even something like Alice in Wonderland, there was like there's a lot of themes in that book and even language in that book that was, so advanced in comparison to what we, knew at that time. But
Mhm.
something about it was so enthralling to me. And so, you know, other books like Phantom Tollbooth or like Redwall, just like I was so drawn to like that, I don't know, like the more advanced vocabulary and the kind of crazy ideas in those books. And so I kind of wanted to capture that, but with a different perspective. So with the speech background, I also studied cognitive science. I'm a PhD student right now. I just kind of wanted to like add in all of these kind of more sciency, philosophical ideas, but but in a way that was nested in this story that was like kind of light and magical, and that had that flair of those books that I really just loved as a kid.
And so, metaphor and visual imagery, it can be powerful for young readers, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
How did you decide how far to lean into metaphor, like ocean, cuttlefish, versus more literal storytelling?
That's a great question. Yeah, I think I leaned really far into the metaphor side. Although, at the same time, it is a balance, right? It's hard, but the the story is actually on the surface really, really simple because instead of a young kid addicted to their phone, it's like a young cuttlefish addicted to their phone. It's like, a lot of that, it's like very direct. Yeah, I just think that the ocean, there's so much beautiful and like mysterious ways that you can use the ocean as metaphors for things. I listened to this podcast that you had with Meg Medina, and she also had this. Yeah, she said something really cool that sort of the ocean for her was like on the edge of like horror and wonder. You know, where it's like there's kind of this beautiful side of the ocean where it's just so vast and there's so much magic in there. You look at like jellyfish would be like multicolored jellyfish or something, or like bioluminescence, and it's so beautiful. But at the same time, there's this kind of scariness. It's so big and there's so many like kind of unknown things in it that it's like horrifying at the same time. Um, and actually, kind of funny anecdote, not anecdote, but funny fact is that the etymological origins of awe are actually rooted in that sense of terror, like rather than wonder. So awe in the beginning kind of had more of a like that horrifying aspect to it. But yeah, I think getting back to the idea of metaphor, I think the ocean, there's just so many ways that you can use metaphor to describe themes in the story while still being kind of a fun and direct experience of a cuttlefish swimming through the ocean, different parts of the ocean, and meeting these other ocean animals. But yeah, she also mentioned in that episode the abyss, and that is sort of like in the depths of the ocean that are less understood and underexplored. You know, I use that as the place that Rumi kind of falls into. So when she is there, she can no longer, see meaning. She's kind of at the kind of limits of her ability to handle this world that is so what's the word? That is so, there's so much that can just overflood our systems, so much stimulus. So,
Yes.
it could be so overwhelming. And so this idea of being in the abyss, trapped in the abyss, and then, being faced with the decision is kind of one of the main metaphors in the book.
Now, I've also want to mention too in your book that it's an illustrated book as well, and collaboration is so important in illustrated books. What was your working relationship like with the illustrator Hansel Kim?
Yeah, she's
How did you share ideas and shape the visual journey together?
yeah, that's so Hansel's awesome. She's one of my best friend's girlfriend, but we've also worked together in the past. She's just a fabulous artist, and she has such a great vision. So, a little more background on this. The book is actually it's a book and a soundtrack, and it started with the soundtrack actually. So, I'm a musician by trade, so that was kind of the start. Is this sort of musical thing, and I put out an album a few years ago, and Hansel did all the illustrations for the album. It's called Moon Rabbit.
Mm.
And so, um, so we had this history of working together, and she just kind of every time I like had an idea about something, like I remember telling her like, "Oh, I had this crazy dream," and and I described the dream, and I was like, "I kind of want that idea to be, this connected to this song that I put out." And she just captured it perfectly. So it was really nice to have that relationship already set there because she really knew what I was going after when I described some of the illustrations for the covers. And Paul Chin, who also is he is a good friend and the label owner of Sanzuru Group, who put out the album connected to the book. He did the spot treatments inside the book, so those kind of little spot images um, in the chapters. He did those, and I think those turned out awesome as well.
Oh, they sure did. And I was going to ask
Thanks.
you, oh, you're welcome. I was going to ask, like, were there any like musical works that inspired you while writing this book?
Yeah, I had this whole playlist that I put on every time I was writing, but there was yeah, I do a lot of I mention a lot of kind of songs in the book, kind of Murakami style. But yeah, I mean, it was really the ambient stuff I was listening to, like sort of like Brian Eno kind of stuff that I was listening to mostly when writing. But the album itself, it's uh, I've been in sort of what they call, I guess, the beat scene, they call it, um, sort of like lo-fi hip hop instrumental kind of things. Um, and the album is a lot of that mixed with, it's kind of like my take on a video game or soundtrack,
Hmm.
but adapted to the book. So each one of the tracks is connected to each one of the chapters in the book. So my thought is that it's kind of this multimedia project where you listen to a track and then you read the book, and the sonic environment and the environment of the book are supposed to kind of pair.
That's interesting because your story invites pausing and noticing and feeling, especially in our digital age. And, how do you think children and adults too, how do you
Yeah.
think they can feel all more in everyday life?
Yeah. Yeah. This thank you for saying that.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's my goal, is that to invite pause and reflection and thought. And, it's so easy. I talked about this before, but it's so easy to like, for example, if you're going to a museum and you want to look at art, um, I think so many people tend to rush through and they want to see everything, you know? Like I want to go see all the museum has to offer to me. So they rush around through the museum and going from piece to piece. saying, "Oh, that's kinda cool, that's kinda cool." And having, at the end, maybe you have a sense of, "Oh, I saw everything in the museum. Nice. Okay, I'm all done." Um, and but, I think it's so much more valuable. You get so much more out of sitting with just one piece because the attention that you pay to something is just most of what you get out of it. That makes sense.
No, it
And,
does. Yes.
yeah, and, like, in this fast-paced world that we're in, it's almost like we're traveling about in this digital museum, and we wanna get all the content, because there's so much out there, man, and so
Yes.
we don't sit with one thing, and we don't and if you don't use your attentional capacities, if you don't use your attention, this is so important for adults and kids to learn and to remember that if you don't use those superpowers that you have, attention is a superpower, I think, then you won't get anything out of it. And we think we get it. It's like this junk food sort of thing. Like, think you're getting a lot of nutrition from a hot Cheeto. I love hot Cheetos, but
Me too.
it's not as nourishing, let's say, as a full meal that you might get, right? Something more substantive. Like if you go to a Michelin star restaurant, you're not gonna like scarf it down. You're gonna
Mm,
think about it. You're
yes.
gonna smell it, uh, take one small bite at a time. And I think we should think about we should think about consuming art in the same way because it can be so nourishing. Books are so nourishing, and reading is so nourishing for our soul.
Mhm.
But it requires that we attend to it, and it requires that we take the time. So, yeah.
That's very important because I did not grow up, uh, with all the technology, and although it's, like you were mentioning that there's so much to filter through, and, you feel like you have to take everything in, but it is great to just pause, and even if you're listening to one song or looking at one piece of art, it's better to do that than just run through everything.
Yeah.
If I don't like a book, if I don't like it by the first chapter, it's finished. I'm not going to continue reading it just because. So yeah, I
Mhm.
I think you're right about that. It's important. And if you could ask a young reader one question after they finish this book, what would you ask to spark a meaningful conversation?
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great question. Well, I mean, I don't know if this is book specific, but I'm always so curious about what brings people on wonder. I've had so many conversations about it that have been so cool because there are themes for sure. There are like definite similarities across people, but there are also these like really cool differences. Everyone kind of is drawn to slightly different things. Like they find slightly different things fascinating. Maybe it would it would be something maybe it'd be two questions, but the general one is like what brings you on wonder in life? And then just specifically which one of these chapters I guess think about made you think about awe and wonder differently. Something like that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And how might educators or librarians use this book in programming? And what activities or discussions would you suggest to deepen engagement with Rumi and the ocean of awe?
Oh, I love that question. Yeah. So like I mentioned, each one of the chapters, right,
Right.
is connected to one of these things that brings on wonder to humans. And I think each of them really are in themselves great jumping off points. And I'm not going to take credit for this. This is all Dr. Keltner's work, but like so for example, that the one of the first chapters is the Starfish Symphony of like, there's Rumi meets this band of starfish that are playing music together. Music was one of those things that commonly brings on wonder to people. And
Mhm.
so, asking kids what they like about music, just a chance to reflect on what music is. Everyone I've noticed that, a lot of my friends and myself, we all hear different things when we listen to a song. So let's say maybe you can listen to the song and think of one thing that popped out to you and just talk about that in a discussion, because I bet it's different for everybody.
Yes.
And that's so cool. That's so cool to know because, I like someone, for example, who like when I listen to music, I never listen to the lyrics. Like I never, like I hear them, but I
Mm.
never know what they're talking about. My like ear goes straight to the harmony and into the instruments, into the timbres. And then, my friend who's a drummer goes straight to the rhythm. He's always like mapping out, this is in, 7/4 or whatever. Oh, there's a teeth note right there. And like, so everyone is just hearing these cool things. And it could be something just like, oh, I like that sound effect. What was that like interesting thing? And
Yeah.
when you are cued to talk about that, you attend in a different way, right? And then when you share, you open up perspectives, there are all these rich things that come out of it. So yeah, I think I would probably do something like that for each one of the chapters, is like using that to talk about the different sources of awe and wonder. Yeah.
Now, do you have a playlist for Awe and Wonder? Do you have a excuse me, for a Rumi and the Ocean of Awe? Do you have a playlist?
I have the whole album, which is free. It's available on Spotify, on any streaming platform. If anyone's interested, I'm happy to send them a download for free on Bandcamp. But yeah, so yeah, I absolutely have that. It's if you buy the book too, there's a little note somewhere that's like, okay, just send me an email and I'll send you the album. But otherwise, if you look up Rumi on Spotify by Go Yama, it'll pop up.
Nice. Well, that's great. I'll add that to this episode.
Awesome, thanks.
Now, Garrett, what has been the most rewarding moment since your book was published? Perhaps a reader comment, a school visit, or maybe something unexpected.
Oh man, just the other day. So I do this podcast, which is unrelated, but it's for speech therapists. And so you have these cool guests on, like researchers.
Hmm.
And I kind of casually mentioned to there's this researcher, Daniel Bowling, who he's at Stanford School of Medicine. He studies music and medicine, like how music can be used as a tool for mental health and things like that. Just doing awesome research. And he's a professor and a researcher there. And I casually mentioned during our conversation that I had this kid's book. And he sent me an email just the other day. He's like, man, I like my son read this and he loved it. And, it sparked a big discussion. And he's like, sent a little comment over. That just totally made my day. I was like, oh man, how cool. And I knew, like, as a first time author, I wasn't expecting, to make a big splash or, anything like that. But it was just something that I felt like it needed to come out, and to have these like small moments like that were so beautiful. Yeah, so that was one of them.
Oh, that's a great moment. Especially, having a young reader make a comment like that or just love your work, that keeps you wanting to do more. And
Yeah.
that's great, right? And was there a moment during the creation of this book when you doubted if the idea was working? How did you move through that?
Yeah. So many times I got stuck at so many different parts of the writing process. Um, and I guess sometimes, and this is more of just like a writing thing, but you can become a little bit too perfectionist, or maybe not perfectionist, but I think I was just trying to please too many people. And I think partway through the story, I just like had this thought that I, just need to write this as something that I find interesting. I was thinking too much about, okay, what would this person think about this? What would this person think about this? And, how would it sell best, and I think ultimately people are like to me, the most compelling stuff, which may not be the most compelling for the largest number of people, but the most compelling stuff is like when you at least write for that audience of one yourself, when you do stuff that really fires you up and interests you. Like there's this in in chapter 3, the philosopher's shell chapter, they go through all these, like, Rumi meets these two nautilus shells who talk, and they sit around a table, basically, go through these, like, famous philosophical problems, like the ship of Theseus, and I give them, like, different names, like, to kind of underwater wordplay.
Mhm.
And it was like, and I sort of was thinking about this, book called Gödel, Escher, Bach, which is this, like, computer science book almost, but he has these cool philosophical puzzles with these 2 characters, and that was so thrilling for me to write. It was so fun, and every time like, shared it, it was like, "Oh, no, this is too complicated, like, I don't get it." For people would give me that feedback, like, "Oh, this is, is would this really, would a teenager really get this or care?" And to me, it's like the ones, yeah, I think so. Like the ones who would care would care. And so I think in the end, I just kind of went with that like, if this is something that fires me up so much, then there's no way I'm not going to write this.
That's good advice because, you could have just said, "Oh, yeah, I'll just not do it." But something sparked that within you to pursue it and to do it, actually do that. And that's good for young people to know that they can do this. If they want to be a writer, if they want to create, that's something that they can do. Do you have
Yeah.
that would give them that you could give them about telling big ideas like wonder in their own work?
Oh man. I think it can be scary, right? You can think that you don't have anything new to say, or at least I did, but that is absolutely not true. Um, we each have such a unique perspective
Mhm.
on the world. Even just like with the I'm going to use complicated words here, with the combinatorics of human DNA, we're all so incredibly diverse, and your perspective is valuable. And even if not for somebody else, it's valuable for yourself to go through this process if you feel called to it. I don't think it's for everyone, but if you have something that feels like it needs to come out, like that you need to write,
Mhm.
you will absolutely grow from that process. And I think people way overemphasize the end result of
Yes.
something, and the goal of, I don't know, some award or sales or whatever it may be. But they forget that the main thing is that you grow from this process. You become someone different. You become someone who thinks about the world in a different way. And I think in a more wise and I don't know, like you meet people, authors who have written so many books and they just have so much wisdom. And I think because they've had time to sit there and cultivate ideas and actually go through the process of writing. And I think that changes you. So that in itself makes it worth it, not just doing it for the sales or something.
Thank you. I agree. I'm not a writer, but I will agree with you with that. Because I think people get frustrated because they want that end result and then they feel like, "Oh, well, I'm not up to it, so there's no one that wants to listen or hear what I have to say or read what I have to say." But
Yeah.
there's an audience out there, and yes, pursue it.
Yeah.
If you wanna do it, you should.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well said. Absolutely.
Are you working on anything new next? Are there any themes or formats that you're excited to explore?
Well, I would love to. I mean, I'm sort of interested in trying to expand what I can do now with the book. I would love to do some video or animation or something like that. That would definitely be so exciting. I think right now, in the midst of doing PhD work, I'm like, I don't know. I don't have the capacity to do much other writing right now. So I'm not working on a new book or anything like that right now. I think once the idea comes around, then I'll start. Yeah, it'll come out eventually.
Once you get through this PhD program, you can kind of like be able to take a moment to see what you want to do next, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because stories, I think stories are so important. People don't, I think it's often not, it's not put in the same realm as like, I don't know, like research or science, but I think that's totally not how we should think about it. Stories are incredibly important and powerful. And
Mhm.
yeah, and I just think that people should definitely take them seriously. And for all the, like, the kids out there reading, like, hey, you're doing such an amazing thing by exposing yourself to these ideas, and you're growing every time you read, I think.
Oh, I love that. You're growing every time you read. That's great. I love that advice. Yeah. Finally, when you look back in 5 years on Rumi and the Ocean of Awe, what do you hope the legacy or impact of the book will be?
I just hope that it has some power to spark these conversations about awe and wonder. And if not awe and wonder, what are the antidotes in your own life to feeling kind of like, that feeling of meaninglessness or purposelessness, or,
Mm.
even just like boredom or distraction, even those things that, you know, I think happen when you are just so flooded by so much stuff and you're feeling overwhelmed.
Yes.
I just think that getting back to sitting down in front of a tree for a really long time and seeing what comes out of that, and remembering, there's like a sense of remembering, because I think that we all have it when we're kids, when we're young. We look at the world in a special way, in a way where everything seems miraculous.
Hmm.
And then slowly everything becomes more gray and more cold geometric shapes than, living, vibrant, colorful, dynamic, the world
Hmm.
like that. Um, which it is always like that. You just got to remember how to see again.
You really do. You have to remind yourself. And sometimes
Yeah.
it take a, a song or music or a story to bring you back to that place. So it's very important. And I know that that's happening with your book, especially with that young reader that mentioned that, because they're taking the time to read the story and then they embrace it. So that's wonderful too.
Well, thank you for saying so. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I hope so. But yeah, if not, I'm very so happy that I was able to put this thing out and to spark some conversations and to be part of cool stuff like this. So
Oh,
thank you so thank you so much for having me.
of course. Now, get ready, Garrett, because we're getting
Yeah.
ready to shift gears. You've listened to this podcast, so you know that the lightning round is coming up. I know you didn't think you were, uh,
Thought I was gonna get away with it, but
yeah, you thought you were gonna get
looks
away.
like
No, but you know how it is. I just give
yeah.
you a question, you answer whatever comes to your head. No,
Okay. Let's
no.
do it.
Let's do it. Okay, here we go. If you could be any sea creature for a day, since your story features a cuttlefish, what would you choose and why?
Oh, definitely be a cuttlefish. Sorry, that's maybe that's too easy of an answer, but cuttlefish are so cool. They're so fascinating. I can't believe it. I mean, if you watch these videos of them, even just changing color, and changing their skin patterns, when they go, go next to different textured material, it's so wild. Blows my mind. So yeah, cuddle, and I think they're cute. I
They
like cuttlefish.
are so good. What's one object in your writing or creating space that you'd never want to give up?
One object in my creative space is I have this little Pomodoro timer. I don't know if people have heard of the Pomodoro technique, but it's just like um, a way of focusing. And for me, it's helpful because, sometimes you get writer's block, you get stuck. And this is for anything, like if you're working on homework or whatever it is that you need to do. When you have a little something there that just will kind of force you to, okay, doesn't matter if I sit here and I just stare at a blank page, but at least I got to sit here for 25 minutes and then I
Mhm.
take a 5-minute break. Like that's really helpful to overcoming writer's block. Because when you do sit there for 25 minutes, you're not going to write nothing. You're going to start with one word, and that word's going to turn into two. And then, on those special days, you'll just catch that thing, that fire, and it'll just keep coming.
What's your go-to snack or creative fuel when you're writing?
Yeah, I'm a fan of Trader Joe's. They got these little acai bowls. I'll eat one of those when I'm feeling low energy.
If you could soundtrack your life right now with one song, what would it be?
Oh man, I guess. Oh man, I just heard D'Angelo pass away, which is very sad. But I've been listening to this I've been listening to this D'Angelo song. How does it feel? That from the old the classic
Mhm.
Voodoo. That's just been on repeat. So
When you
that
were
one.
in middle school, what book totally changed your mind about what a story could be?
Mm, about what a story could be, huh? This was probably elementary school, maybe.
Mhm.
Um, if that's all right. But I think, I just feel like when I first read Redwall, that was
Oh,
like, I love, yeah, I just like really, I don't know. There's something grabbed me. And also that, yeah, I've loved, I feel like every page of those books when I was that age, I was just really interested in words, I don't know why. There's something like really special about words. And so there are all these words that would pop up on every page. And I was just so curious to like look them up and like, find out what they meant.
wow. Well, Garrett, thank you. I want to thank you so much for being on Reading in the Middle. This was a wonderful conversation and fun as well. I've learned some new things of what was it? The Pomodorian time?
Pomodoro technique, yeah,
Pomodoro
yeah.
tech? I should
Look
know
that
this.
one up. Look
I
that one up, yeah.
But thank you. This was such a pleasure. Thank you for being on the show. And our listeners, you must go and get Rumi and the Ocean of Awe and look for it at your bookstore, independent one, uh, or your local library. And encourage your branch if they don't have it to carry it.
Yes, that would be great, thank you. And thank you so much for having me, this was so fun, yeah.
Today's guest was Garrett Ryan Oyama, author, musician, storyteller, whose book Rumi and the Ocean of Awe invites us to pause, breathe, and remember the way wonder feels. Also, for those who love music, Garrett has released a companion album to Rumi on Spotify, so you can let the story move from page to sound. If our conversation stirred your curiosity, I hope you'll check out the book at your local library or independent bookstore. Share it with a middle grade reader or hold it on your own shelf as a reminder that awe is always waiting. Thank you for joining me. Please subscribe, leave a review, and until next time, I'm Annisha Jeffries, and this has been Reading in the Middle. Keep reading, keep wondering, and keep finding the magic in the middle.